What's your most shameful NSFW moment? In the 90s early 2000s we bought a pub and moved into it. It had a big screen downstairs and we lived above. But Sky Sports was so expensive for the business account we basically hooked the giant screen to our box upstairs so whenever the sport was on it would show on the screen downstairs. So we couldn't watch TV upstairs except what was being shown on the big screen when this was happening. Anyway, one Sunday evening around 10 p.m. after the sport, bearing in mind the sport finished at 6 p.m. I was freely browsing through channels because the giant screen has been wound up into the ceiling and my 14-year-old self came across some softcore porn. Curious, I started watching it. Suddenly there was a big buzz from the phone that connected to downstairs. I answer it. It's my mom with laughing in the background. "What are you watching?" I was like, I was just flicking through channels." "Well, you've stayed on that one for a while, haven't you?" I forgot a boo at the small TV in the bar area. It was still on and was showing the entire pub what my horny 14-year-old ass was watching. I was mortified. Luckily my mom never brought it up again and neither did any of the customers, thankfully. What's your most shameful NSFW moment? Part 4. My HS girlfriend, many decades ago, giving me an enthusiastic blowjob. Right at the very moment when her mother came home. It startled my GF to the point she accidentally inhaled my cum, and jumped up, headbutting me in the nose. Literally seconds after her mom burst into her room to see her daughter buck nude, on all fours, coughing out jizz like a cat with a hairball, and me, buck nude, with a rock-hard erection and covered in blood. What's your most shameful NSFW moment? Part 3. When I was with my ex, we did some long distance for a while. While I am not about sending nudes, after not seeing each other for a long time you kinda get an urge to see the other person naked. So, nudes were exchanged. She was mostly interested in close-ups of my erect penis so I sent those. Upon returning home I discovered that she had set a picture of my erect penis as my profile picture in her phone, meaning that if I'd call her, my penis would be presented on the screen in all its glory. I told her this was a very stupid idea. What if I'd call and her phone was laying around somewhere? She said she never had her phone laying around so no one would see. I didn't think much of it. Few weeks later we were having dinner with her parents and she was talking about getting a new phone. Her father, with a straight face and in between 2 bites of his food, remarked, "Gee, if you get this new phone, does that mean you'll install a different picture for when he calls you?" I died 1,000 deaths. What's your most shameful NSFW moment? Part 2. When I was around 10-11 years old, my dad got my brother and I a computer to use. He set it up in the den and pretty much allowed us free unsupervised access to it. He had gone out with his friends one night, and my brother, one of his friends, and myself were on the internet just typing in random things and adding com to it. Now back in the early 2000s it didn't take long for us to stumble upon porn, which led us to clicking on more and more porn links because we were all like, "Holy shit, there's naked women on here." Eventually we bricked the computer and it blue screened on us. Instead of turning it off, unplugging the computer, turning off the monitor, we just left it and went to bed. My dad got home and saw the blue screen, did the old Control, Alt, Delete trick to pull up the task manager, saw that we had porn pulled up on the web browser. At this point he makes us all come out into the den, sits us on the couch and tries to make us confess to why the computer was blue screened. We of course shrugged and acted like we had no clue. He then turned the monitor on and went through the internet history. We all had to sit there while my dad clicked through some of the most heinous debased shit I've ever seen in my life. The whole time he was just reading out the history and then he'd say something like, "Jesus fucking Christ, what the hell is wrong with you all?" Yeah, that computer did not last very long. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? Was casually seeing this girl who later married this other dude. She'd intermittently get in touch and ask me to come round to her house in the middle of the night, sneak me in the front door and blow me in the hallway while her hubby was asleep upstairs. Found out later they were swingers and always wondered if hubby was actually awake and watching in the dark. She was super hot so would have been rude to refuse. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? My next door neighbor was a female bodybuilder. I was 16 and obsessed, persuaded her to let me babysit, because in my mind when she came home after a night out I might have a chance. Turns out, it didn't take much. Turned into a bi-weekly thing for a year till we moved. No one ever knew I was fucking my 40-years-old neighbor and to this day I have an obsession with muscly women. Now I look back on it, it was pretty fucked up. But I have several fucked up stories like this. Not sure which wins. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? My next door neighbor was a female bodybuilder. I was 16 and obsessed, persuaded her to let me babysit, because in my mind when she came home after a night out I might have a chance. Turns out, it didn't take much. Turned into a bi-weekly thing for a year till we moved. No one ever knew I was fucking my 40-years-old neighbor and to this day I have an obsession with muscly women. Now I look back on it, it was pretty fucked up. But I have several fucked up stories like this. Not sure which wins. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? My next door neighbor was a female bodybuilder. I was 16 and obsessed, persuaded her to let me babysit, because in my mind when she came home after a night out I might have a chance. Turns out, It didn't take much, turned into a bi-weekly thing for a year till we moved. No one ever knew I was fucking my 40 years old neighbor, and to this day I have an obsession with muscly women. Now I look back on it, it was pretty fucked up. But I have several fucked up stories like this. Not sure which wins. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? In 2017, when I first got back into dating after being off the market for 12 years, I met this girl on OkCupid who seemed to have a higher than average sex drive which matched mine. What she hadn't shared were her kinks. On our second date we had gone swimming, and after we got back to her place we banged it out, and then she suggested we take a shower together. In the shower things get soapy and hot. She starts to blow me and I had to stop her and say I need to pee real fast. She turns the water down, scoots back, and asks me to piss on her face and chest. Golden showers aren't my thing. I hadn't given one to anyone since I was 5 years old, and at that time it was an act of revenge for someone hitting my little brother. 30 some odd years later here's this hot nurse asking me to piss on her face and chest. I was torn. Normally I have a shy bladder, yet here was this woman looking up at me with these doe eyes begging for my piss. She grabs my dick and aims it at herself and I begin peeing. It was very strange having someone else control my penis while I peed. She got her face, her chest, some in her mouth. She genuinely seemed so happy getting pissed on. When I was done she licked the last few drops from my tip and then went to town blowing me. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? When I was like 9 to 10 years old I figured out all this sexual stuff and thought masturbating is awesome. Did it too much, and even to the point that I put cat treats down there next to it so my cat would eat it there. I did that once still when I was 10 years old. Still ashamed nowadays if I think of it. I don't know what was going on inside my head. Not a lot I think, until when I was 11 I had a mental breakdown and felt bad for everything I did. I even felt guilty for masturbating itself. Told every single thing I did my mom dad. Was a hard time but they handled the situation good. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? At 16 I stole a fleshlight from a local sex store, then drove off not being able to wait to use it. I used it while driving and actually finished, but post-nut clarity set in. I threw it out the window into what I thought was some woods, but I looked last second to have an image burned into my mind. The image of a used fleshlight exploding onto a gravestone from a cemetery at 45 miles per hour. Reality set in then. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? I'm a 45-year-old man. I live in a co-op apartment building in New York City. I worked on a building beautification project with a fellow resident about 6 months ago. I'm guessing she's about 30 years my senior. All during the project we shared a lot of laughs and formed a comfortable friendship. At the end of the project, she invited me to her apartment for dinner. We shared some great conversation and a lot of wine. At some point while I was talking, she put her hand over mine which I was resting on the table. She leaned in for a kiss and I reciprocated. We had sex that night. It was good sex too. A week or so later she called me up and asked if I could change a light bulb in her ceiling. It was a pretext for us to have sex again. Since then, we've established a relationship where she texts me requesting some help. I go over to her place and we have sex. If I told anyone in my life that I'm having a sexual relationship with a woman in her mid-70s, I'm not sure what the reaction would be. I think they'd think I've lost my mind. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? When I was 19 I paid $350 for the services of a woman of the night. I left and went to a friend's house where they were having a party. I got very drunk and realized I left my phone charger at this woman's motel. So I took an Uber back and she wouldn't let me back in again unless I paid, so I gave her another $350, did the dirty deeds and grabbed my charger and left. It wasn't until the next day I realized I could have just spent $10 on a new charger. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? I tried to suck my own dick which gave me a hernia that still is painful sometimes even 30 years later. Moral: when young, stretch every day. Edit. I did succeed, but I did not swallow. That was one bridge too far, so since I did not dare to climax I stopped doing it. It did not feel like sucking a dick at all but felt like getting it sucked 100%. I got the hernia surgically fixed. Still the metal plate is annoying sometimes but nothing that bad. What is something NSFW you've done but if you told anyone they would probably never want to talk to you again? I had a girlfriend in college who had a cum fetish. She would jerk me off into her toothbrush and sit there and keep it in her mouth while we watched Dr. House Save Lives on TV. A few times she jerked me off into her food. That was weird. I saw her on Facebook a few years ago. She sells bath bombs and stuff like that. I wouldn't buy from her though. What's the most horrific act committed by someone you know personally? I live down the road from Terry Joe Volner. He rode my bus every day, and was also a violent, horrible person. He murdered a 5-year-old because he had feelings for the kid's mom and I guess she didn't feel the same. So he murdered one of her kids, took a picture of the child's body and sent it to the child's mom and told her he was going to kill her other kids that he was babysitting if she didn't come home right now. He got life. Then he beat his cellmate to death with his bare hands so brutally they consider the death penalty. He got life again. What's the most horrific act committed by someone you know personally? Worked with a guy who got done for manslaughter. He bashed someone's head in with a table in a pub. This was after he stabbed a guy in the chest with darts. This was over a darts game. He also served time for beating a policeman into a coma with the policeman's own truncheon after the policeman caught him breaking into a car. What's the most horrific act committed by someone you know personally? My father beat the shit out of my mother and myself when I was a toddler. I have an uneven skull because of it. Until I found out, I thought it was a birth defect. I didn't find this out from my mother until I was an adult when I had to take him to court because he had opened numerous credit cards with my social security number when I was a kid and had tanked my credit by the time I was 18. Murder, twice. 2 separate incidents. 1. Killed a guy in a fight, not intentional, goes in for 10, serves 8. 2. Gets out. Another guy we knew gives him a hard time about how many times he sucked dick. Shot him in the face later that evening. He's not getting out. How do you think you're going to die? Alone. Probably heart failure. It runs in the family. I'm probably gonna get old and fall down a large thing of stairs. I don't know how, but I'm sure my last words will be, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I'll mysteriously disappear from a cruise ship. An investigation will reveal a $1 million life insurance policy was taken out on me. One day, I'll have my life together in a mind-blowing manner. Own my house, be married to someone I love, have a thriving business, be famous, probably, stellar mental and physical health, everything I could ever hope for. Then, I'll forget to look both ways and get hit by a car. What's your story about the one that got away that turned out being a gigantic bullet dodged? I've told this story before in another post. Anyway, I was engaged to this guy who was apparently engaged to this other girl too. I dumped him of course and they got married. He strangled her to death. What's your story about the one that got away that turned out being a gigantic bullet dodged? Dated a guy in high school for about 6 months. He broke up with me for another girl. They didn't last long and I ended up moving a state away. He would come visit. I decided I wasn't going to keep a LDR at 15 and I cut it off. A few years later I got a call that he had run away to another state with his then 16 years old GF, shot her and then shot himself when they got to their destination. Literally dodged that bullet. What is the darkest thing you have ever done and don't regret? I bit the dick of the guy who forced it in my mouth. Girls, what's the downside of being a female? The way hormones fuck with your body. First puberty, then childbirth, and top it all off with menopause. Don't forget the monthly cycle. Big boobs that hurt my back. 'Tis a blessing and a curse. The complications that come with a vagina. BV again? UTI? Yeast infection from the UTI antibiotics? BV came back cause of the yeast infection that you got treating your UTI? Such a pain sometimes, having to go to the gynecologist. I literally get lightheaded every time I think of it. A lot of women would find this as lucky, but I get my period for 1 to 2 days every month. It hurts so bad. I showed my sister one of my bloody pads and she said maybe you're having a miscarriage. Today I fricked up by swiping on my girlfriend's phone. So this happened a few days ago and I'm still not sure I'm 100% ready to tell the story, but here goes. I've been with my girlfriend for about a year and I already know she is the love of my life. She's perfect for me. We're perfect for each other. We're getting ready to move in with each other and I want nothing more than to start a family with her and spend the rest of my life with her. We went on a short vacation last week and when we returned she gave me her phone to look at some photos from the trip. She went to the bathroom while I had her phone, and as I was scrolling through the pictures it kind of jumped to a period that was about 1.5 years ago. If you have an iPhone you know what I'm talking about. You scroll a little bit too fast and all of a sudden you're back at the start of the photo album. It's annoying as hell, but some photos caught my eye. Some photos that I really shouldn't be seeing, of her and a previous boyfriend. There she is, the love of my life, trying to get her mouth around the biggest dick I've ever seen in my life. I've watched porn, a lot. I've never seen a dick like this. I'm talking bigger than 2 Coke cans stacked on top of each other, longer and thicker. As far as I could tell she was unable to get her teeth around it. I could see another thumbnail of her comparing the size of his dick to her forearm with a look of wonder and glee on her face. I closed the pictures and I've acted like nothing has happened, but I cannot get these images out of my mind. I've never been self-conscious about my dick size. In fact, if you believe the stats, I'm significantly above average, but this has destroyed my self-esteem. We haven't had sex since. I can't concentrate on my work. I just wish I had never seen those damn pictures. What is the one thing you did while horny that you immediately regretted afterwards? When I was like 12 to 13 I decided to wrap my dick in duct tape in a bout of adolescent horniness. I used like the whole roll and it made a big beehive type thing. After I played out my curiosity I had this big monstrosity with pubes stuck to it I had to get rid of. So I buried it in the bathroom garbage can. A few days later we were all eating dinner at the kitchen table and my mom asked what I did with the plastic wrap I was using earlier. My dad blurted out maybe he wrapped his dick in it. What do you wish Hollywood would stop doing? Making it impossible to hear dialogue, having a main character whose job income level does not match their home or lifestyle at all, milking everything dry, turning everything into a universe, scenes that are too fucking dark to actually see. If I wanted to listen to a show, I'd download an audiobook, spoiling the film in the trailers, whispering mumbling dialogue then cutting to a chase scene, dramatic posing close-ups, forcing a love story that makes no sense in a movie that has nothing to do with romance. What's a dark secret you want to get off of your chest? When I was 7 I was home alone. I called 911 due to a house fire that consumed half the house and they found me outside. My mother, who was at work, I was a latchkey kid, was told by the fire department that it was an electrical fire. In truth, I had a lighter and was fascinated by fire. I was burning the little tassels at the end of the blanket on my bed, putting them out before it caught the whole blanket on fire. Until I wasn't able to and the whole bed caught fire. An electrical outlet shorted out from the heat, which caused the firemen to think that was the cause. I'm 40 now. My mother still doesn't know the truth and I still remember it all vividly, complete with the heat on my face as I tried in vain to put out the bed. Today I freaked up by obliterating my wife's fish. Happened last night. Wife's 8-year-old very large goldfish was passing away. Had dropsy, was suffering, and was on the verge of death. Wife and I looked into the symptoms and there was practically no hope of him making a recovery, so she asked me to euthanize him. Looking into methods, it seemed pretty agreed upon that the most effective and quick way to euthanize a fish was blunt force trauma. Now, when I was a kid my family were huge anglers, and I was designated as the fish killer when it was time to cook them. Back then, I was told to slam them on the ground as hard as I could. Well, my 8-year-old body wasn't strong enough to kill them instantaneously, so I had to do it multiple times. Honestly, it kind of fucked me up a little. Flash forward to last night. I didn't want that happening again and I wanted it to be painless. I asked my wife to leave the room because she was very upset and I chose to do the deed by putting the fish in a plastic grocery bag and slamming it on the counter as hard as I possibly could. The poor fish was absolutely obliterated. The force ripped open the bag and sprayed bits of what used to be a goldfish in every direction. Told my wife to stay upstairs and she started getting suspicious, so she comes down after 5 minutes and it's just everywhere still. On the counter, on the stove, on the fridge, on the freaking Christmas tree we still have up. I was still finding pieces of it this morning. Wife was aghast and traumatized. Cried until she went to bed. What food do you swear people only pretend to like? Fondant on like wedding cakes. Circus peanuts. There's no way people are actually out there enjoying those things, but enough people pretend to keep them in business. Stevia. There's absolutely no way someone enjoys that aftertaste. It's a weird cult that I'm not willing to join in such a dominant flavor. Extremely hoppy IPAs. I enjoy bitterness in my beer, and I know there are some good IPAs out there, but it's gotten to the point that breweries seem to be competing with one another to see who can make the bitterest, most unappealing beers imaginable. They taste like earwax. What is something you will not tolerate during sex? Talking like Goofy and doing his laugh. If my wife ever said that to me, she'd 100% be getting a hot dog. Yuck. Right before she was about to come the next time we had sex. Today I freaked up by almost dying via jerk-off. Well, technically it was yesterday. I spent all day smoking weed, like 4 grams or something in total. I am pretty new to smoking, so I think I may have overdone it in retrospect. Anyway, up until yesterday I had never had sex or masturbate while high. I am the kind of guy who likes to try everything once, so in order to end the day on a high, I decided to masturbate and then go to bed. So I started doing what you do, climbing the mountain, and just as I reached the summit, I passed out. Next thing I remember, I am lying on the floor, comb-covered stomach, Reddit open to our porn and my Fitbit telling me my heart rate was 201. This freaked out enough to sober me up for enough time to take a cold shower and eat 8 Activia hard healthy yogurts to try and make up to my heart for what it had just experienced. I managed to get my heart rate down enough either through the shower or the yogurts, I don't know which, and then went to bed. It's the next morning now and I am fine. I will probably try it again sometime, but maybe less high. What a weird and also quite sad near-death experience. Today I freaked up by asking my high school crush to have sex with me. I've always had a crush on this girl, but we graduated a few years ago and I never had the courage to ask her out. Fast forward to a week ago when I saw a post of hers on Facebook. I clicked on her profile just out of curiosity and saw that her relationship status was single. I'm single as well, but not looking for a relationship right now. So I sent her a message to ask how she was doing and we exchanged a few messages just talking about our lives and such. Then I asked her if she was really single and she said yeah, why? I basically said that I always found her attractive and would love to have sex with her if she was interested. I wanted to be honest and blunt about my intentions. I let her know it was no big deal if she wasn't interested. She said, why would you even ask that, and blocked me. I've been thinking about it for the last week and I'm kicking myself that I said that. I really wish I could go back in time and redo that whole conversation. I know that I came off as creepy and it makes me cringe just to think about it. How did you figure out your significant other cheated on you? Part 1. Throwaway account to protect the innocent. Social services called me to discuss my children's safety, because my wife was going out with a registered pedophile. Needless to say, we're no longer married. My uncle got home from work early to find his wife in bed with some other guy. Uncle went to the kitchen and made 3 cups of tea, put them on a tray, walked into the room and sat on the end of the bed. The wife and the guy froze, eyes like dinner plates, while uncle offered them a cup of tea. He stayed calm as fuck, which freaked the guy out. He jumped up, gathered his clothes and legged it out of the house. Uncle calling after him, hey, where you going mate? I made tea. Guy didn't respond, just kept running. Unc told his wife she has exactly 7 minutes to vacate the house. Uncle Jim is fucking boss. How did you find out someone had a crush on you? She sent me an email with pornographic photos with our heads pasted on them. She had been an internet friend that I had no romantic interest in and never flirted with. She never flirted with me either so far as I could tell. We had talked for about 3 years, almost daily, but always platonic stuff. She was quite a bit older than me, and while I never told her this, I looked at her more like a fun aunt. I got a girlfriend, and when I told my friend about it, she absolutely flipped out, cussed me up one side and down the other, told me I had broken her heart, on and on and on. I was stunned. I apologized and told her I had just seen us as friends and hadn't meant to make her think it was anything more than that. That's when the porn photos started showing up, and creepy this could have been as messages. I blocked her on everything, which was like 2 things because this was 20 years ago. About a year ago I got curious and looked up her name. She ran for and won a small government position in her hometown about 3 years back. Found some newspaper articles and discovered a few things. 1. She had been married for 30 years. She had claimed to be single when we talked. 2. I had been 19 when we started talking. She had claimed to be 30. She had actually been 42. 3. She had kids that are older than me.